Hello there, everyone. Welcome back for some more Let's Read Fate's Strange Fake, Volume 6. Today we're moving on to Chapter 17, Breaking Dawn and Wakeless Dreams 2. So we'll see what's going on. Last time we did hear about Zhang, who, again, we know about because of the appearance in the anime. But I'm hoping for some new stuff here. So let's see here. Chapter 17, Day 3. Day 3. Morning, Snowfield Police Station, Chief's Office. A full day had passed in Snowfield since the deadly battle in front of the hospital. The damage to Main Street had been explained away as an underground gas and water pipe accident triggered by the pipeline explosion that had left the crater in the desert. The terrorists supposed to have attacked the police station had sabotaged the pipes before the attack, and the delayed effect on plumbing already damaged by the desert explosion and magnified the tragedy, or so the cover story went. Possibly it had been judged that the gas company would not last until the end of the Holy Grail War without an excuse. Yeah, that's like a thing. What about the gas companies, man? They just get screwed over. The townspeople's anger was directed at non-existent terrorists. Directed at the non-existent terrorists, but because the news that the terrorists were still at large was spread at the same time, a portion of the citizens developed a sense of danger and began to avoid visiting the city's urban areas without a good reason. In the midst of that situation, one man's muttering filled his spacious office. So Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, was taken down. Snowfield's chief of police, Orlando Reeve, muttered to himself with a frown as went over the reports of one of its subordinates assigned to monitor Gilgamesh's master, Tine Chelk, in her faction. He had guessed as much based magical energy. I think they're missing an on there. He had guessed as much based on magical energy measurements he had conducted in his office the night before. Kuraoka Tsubaki, the Kuraoka's daughter, was believed to have somehow developed command spells while unconscious and became a master. He had dispatched officers to take Tsubaki into protective custody and confirm the intentions of her servant, but their visit had turned into a melee between multiple heroic spirits. Orlando had observed an extraordinary torrent of magical energy. An instant later, the spirit origin response he believed to be the King of Heroes Gilgamesh had fluctuated and was now becoming undetectable. Our most dangerous enemy is gone. Or at least, that's how I normally ought to look at this. The chief had not despaired, but his face was severe. He may have lost a powerful enemy, but the blow to his own faction had been devastating. More than 20 of his subordinates, all but a few he had held back in case a third party attempted to exploit the commotion, had vanished immediately after the King of Heroes' spirit origin faded. If they had been killed, he would be able to give up on them and immediately shift focus to his next move. He did not have enough of a mage's mentality to be unmoved by the loss, but he was prepared for all of them to die, himself included. But, while he was not going to complain, not knowing if they were alive or dead did force him to consider his next move. There were not even traces of corpses. Only the material damage remained. Most of the nearby surveillance cameras had already been destroyed by the battle, but several surviving cameras had captured footage of a black mist welling up from the direction of the hospital. It looked like little more than thin smog on video, but if some form of magical energy were at work, then it might appear thicker to the naked eyes of mages or heroic spirits. Even his second-in-command, Vera Levitt, had disappeared. The chief had lost most of his pawns, but he considered confirming whether they were alive or dead his top priority. Even supposing that the mist did take their lives, the absence of bodies has to mean something. Consider the motive, save figuring out who did what for later. Do they plan to use the corpses, either by controlling them like zombies, or by extracting information about us directly from their brains? If they aren't dead, they might brainwash them without killing them, or torture them for information. It was depressing to think that he risked his subordinates turning against him or having information stolen in either case, but the chief continued his conjecture. Other possible reasons. Does Kuraoka Tsubaki's servant need to hide a large number of humans somewhere? Either way, It boils down to a why done it. Okay, so I see you are friends with Waver. Well, friends, I don't know, partners, associates, I don't know their exact relation. Although, well, I can manage painstaking investigation, deductions were never my specialty. Its master's orders? No, that couldn't be it. Cour Tsubaki is comatose. She's in no condition to communicate with her servant. Wait, is that really true? I'm deliberately severing the link, but according to Faldius, servants' memories can flow into their masters through the magical energy that connects them. What about the reverse? What if I read something from Tsubaki's subconscious mind while she's comatose and... Just as the chief's thoughts were accelerating, a voice that slammed on the brakes sounded through the room. Yo! The chief turned and saw his own servant, Caster Alexandre Dumas Père. What are you doing here, Caster? Oh, I've just been lending a hand. What do you mean? Sorry, bro. Dumas answered the chief's suspicious question. You cut off telepathy from your end. And again, I didn't try the phone because I was sure you'd stop me. Wait, what are you talking about? The chief asked, despite suspecting he would not like the answer. Well, Dumas continued lightheartedly, plopping down onto the visitor's sofa in the corner of the office. It was lucky I was watching the fighting from a step back. If I'd been at ringside, I'd be in that black mist now myself. Of course, I probably could have focused on supporting your officers better that way. You were there? I don't remember giving that order. Yeah, and I don't remember getting it. Good to know both our memories are in good shape. We could be witnesses for an alibi. That's an important role in plays and novels. Do you understand your position? My officers and I can be replaced, but if anything happens to you, our heroic spirit, our faction is finished. The chief's words were charged with a quiet anger, but Dumas brushed off his feelings with a shrug and answered as flippantly as if he were ordering breakfast. Not really. There are plenty of other ways you can make it work. It's about time we got some heroic spirits at a loose end with their masters killed, and just make a contract with one of them. Do you think you can get out of this with assumptions like that? I'm saying that you wanted into this war, so don't chalk it up as finished so easily. At Dumas's words, the chief paused to take several deep breaths in silence, wiped all trace of anger and impatience from his face, and resumed speaking with careful self-control. I suppose you're right. Sorry. Even if all our forces, including the two of us, die, we shouldn't consider that the end. I like how it only takes you a second to cool your head. I'll take that as a consolation, but cooling my head won't help me to improve our situation. Then have some good news. My treat. Your officers who disappeared are still in good shape. The chief's eyes widened slightly. I can still sense the weapons I cooked up, Dumas continued with a cheerful grin. I may not be much of a caster for this Grail War, but I can at least tell if things I've been mixed up with still exist or not. Going by my feelings, the weapons I gave them are still somewhere in our world, but not somewhere you could walk to. That's my honest opinion. But the fact that noble phantasms are intact doesn't guarantee their users' safety, does it? The chief asked suspiciously. John's alive, at least, Dumas answered. I'll explain that later. It just means I've got a noble phantasm I haven't told you about yet. No. If you say you'll explain later, I'll wait. My officer's safety takes priority. The chief swallowed whatever he was about to say and returned his attention to the problem at hand. Still, I don't understand. Are they in some kind of ward? Don't tell me it's a reality marble. A reality marble. At the thought of the term, the chief mentally let out a little groan. A reality marble? That's great magecraft, right? Builds up a little world out of mental landscape and jams it into our world? Your understanding is a little crude, but not entirely mistaken. A reality marble or similar magecraft would certainly be capable of isolating a certain number of people. It wouldn't surprise me if a heroic spirit had a trick or two like that up their sleeve. It ought to require a massive supply of magical energy. It could hold the people who disappeared captive for a short time, but not over an extended period. Even in the world of magecraft, reality marbles were said to approach magic. Considering the magical energy of mages, even a heroic spirit should not be able to overwrite reality with their world, sometimes even bending the laws of physics for more than a few minutes. It would be a different story if they had a source of magical energy to maintain it longer, but their surveillance system ought to detect some sign of movement of magical energy on that scale. It's possible that Faldius had already picked it up and is withholding that information. No, there's also that massive magical energy reading that did suddenly appear last night. We should keep running the surveillance system, but it's possible to completely conceal a flow of magical energy on that scale. If it's possible, we'll need to try other approaches as well. When the chief sank into thought, Dumas was reading a newspaper lying on the reception table. Hey, got more bad news. Get a load of this. There's a hurricane headed straight for us. Think a heroic spirit could be behind that? The hurricane developed far to the west of us. I'd like to think it's unrelated. Still. Going by that sour face, I'm guessing you're not so optimistic. That's good. Whether it's connected or not, wind and rain is gonna blow all our plans out of whack. Looks like a whole bunch of your country's big shots died in one day too. That's another storm to worry about. I'm concerned about that, but I doubt I'd get a satisfactory answer out of it out of Faldius or that old bitch. Timing being what it was, the chief suspected everything taking place in the United States of being involved with the whole fake Holy Grail War in Snowfield. But even if it were connected, he frustratingly lacked any immediate way to be certain. In Snowfield, with the situation only growing worse, the chief realized his own powerlessness. No, I already knew that. I was always prepared to be outclassed in terms of ability. Still, the chief clenched his fists. So what are you gonna do, bro? Dumas asked casually. What do you mean? Well, what are you gonna do when you're gonna go and save them? It'll depend on where they vanish to, but if a heroic spirit like me can sneak in there, I'd give it a shot. Chief frowned. He did not know everything about the heroic spirit he had summoned, but he did have a general grasp of his abilities. You almost fooled me earlier, but I can't afford to send you to the front lines. I haven't ordered you to go that far, and I don't intend to. If you're going to insist on acting on your own initiative, again, I'll restrict your movements, even if it means using a command spell. Chief's tone was severe. Dumas wiped his usual grin off his face and answered in earnest. No, you did order me. And first thing, too. What do you... Brother, you asked me to make weapons for your officers, to give them the strength to fight. The bunch of people who are novice mages and compared to heroic spirits ain't much different from the brats rocking in strollers out there in the park. Dumas flipped through the newspaper, pointing to a page of a serialized short story by an author living in Las Vegas, and tapped it with his finger as he began to expound. I'm an author, brother. What strength can I give you guys? What weapons? Is it the noble phantasm that latched onto me from who knows where when I became a heroic spirit, whatever that is? The item creation skill I got served as garnish? Well, that's one answer, but it doesn't get to the heart of the matter. At that point, Dumas stopped his fingers and lifted the newspaper between them. There's only one thing I can give to other people. Stories. Stories. The next instant, Alexander Dumas saw the newspaper fluttering through the air and loudly proclaimed amid the rain of letters, fiction or non-fiction, plays I edited or my own autobiography, fantasies worked out from A to Z inside my head, lofty personages, and historical ways of life reworked into history, a compiled history of the world's cooking. Every last one of them is a story. I still want to get that real cookbook. That just sounds super interesting to have. Dumas continued in a clear voice, like he was performing a scene in a play. He was not raising his voice, but it echoed in the pit of your stomach like the song of a huge whale heard up close. The chief judged that, even if it were only illusion, the words were sufficient to create that illusion. He did not ignore it as more of the heroic spirit's usual banter. Seeing the chief's attitude, Dumas went on in high spirits. It's true that Mr. Garibaldi said he was going to start a revolution. I supported him with ships and money and weapons, but that was a story too. The moment other people found out that gold, guns, and glory had fallen into someone else's hands, things gained a bunch of meanings. Alexandre Dumas, author of Les Trois Mousquetaires, supporting the hero, causing a sensation. I might have not had much of an effect back then. It was enough to influence one person's life. I glanced at some info about me online, and that story was there all right. That at least shows the people remembered it for 100 years and a bit. After hearing Dumas's speech, delivered like an actor in a play, the chief fell silent for a few moments, and then ordered his emotions as he began to speak. I understand what you're trying to say, but that has nothing to do with you putting yourself in harm's... But Dumas cut him off. John Wingard. The unexpected proper noun from Dumas caused the chief to freeze for an instant. Vera Levitt, Annie Cowran, Dawn Hawkins, Chadwick Lee, Yuki Capote, Adrina Eisenstein. The chief immediately recognized the list of names that Dumas rattled off as he carefully picked up the sheets of newspaper that had been sent dancing through the air. They were names of all of the members of Clan Kaladin, the fighting force he had organized. It was only a list of names, but the chief felt an undeniable power behind the words and continued to listen without interrupting. Sophia Valentine, Eddie Brando, and last but not least, you, brother, Chief of Police Orlando Reeve. I knew you had been looking up details, but I didn't expect you to memorize all of their names. Oh, not just their names. Their faces, voices, personal histories, and everything else I could learn, down to the favorite herbs and spices. But you're the type to memorize all your officers' names yourself, aren't you, brother? Dumas was not boasting. Once he had finished his matter-of-fact statement, he placed the neatly folded newspaper on the table and moved to the chief's desk. The heroic spirit planted both his hands on the desk, leaned his large frame forward, and addressed his own words to his master. The names I just listed were the cast of characters. They're already major characters in one of my works. At that point, Dumas grinned broadly, spread his arms wide, and concluded, I don't consider myself as God, and I've got no intention of controlling him, but the program is a once-in-a-lifetime Holy Grail War. Perhaps the first and last one you and your people will ever see, and I provided a bit of the script in the form of weapons and power. I'm giving the actors a little twist, but I don't know how it's going to turn out in the end, even for me. Doesn't that sound like the ultimate play? The ultimate life? Doesn't it make you want a front row seat? Damn, I love whenever Dumas is speaking. He's kind of one of my favorites. Anyways, we're off to within the ward. You mean this is a fake world? Kasajo muttered disbelievingly, slipping through the church doors and looking out at the world spread out under the blue sky. It was a beautiful cityscape, the kind of scene that would be picked up out for the cover of a tourism pamphlet. It lacked the weight of history, but the well-ordered blocks of buildings displayed harmony, and the casino hotels and municipal offices in the city center stood out as especially grand. The city scenery was the same as ever, but even Aika could tell at a glance that the situation was not normal. For one, she could see no one in the city except herself and the police officers. For another, the church and main street in front of the hospital, which had been so showily destroyed the night before, had been restored as if nothing had happened. It's all fixed. How? No. It looks less like it was repaired than like it was never damaged. Saber, Richard the Lionheart, who was linked to Ayaka by magical energy, responded. As he said, there were no traces of repairs on the street, and skid marks and stains that looked like days old remained as they had been. Ayaka could not bring herself to believe it. If this really is a fake world, she asked Saber, can magecraft do something like that? Yes, although this is coming close to magic, but it's probably just barely achievable if you poured a ridiculous amount of time, skill, and resources into it, so I guess it is magecraft and not magic. Saber sounded almost relaxed. Aika heaved a half-exasperated sigh. You know, this situation seems really weird to me. Yes, it is. But at the same time, it stimulates my curiosity. Doesn't the thought of whoever cast this great magecraft excite you? What will we do if the great Merlin or someone like him turns up? In terms of this era's values, I think I ought to get their autograph. I don't care. Aika shot back a perfunctory response. And I don't know much about this Merlin guy. Maybe, but he'd be a powerful enemy. What should we do? Throw him at the moon? No, I'm sure that was just one of Mother's embellishments. Still, he's a legendary mage. If we're lucky enough to catch him, maybe I could hold him by the leg and swing him around as my Excalibur. Oh my god, he might make a powerful magic sword. It's worth asking if I do get to meet him. Aika looked at Saber, who was quietly getting worked up and muttering nonsense to himself with a grin, and kept walking, thinking to herself that he certainly inherited his mother's imagination. More importantly, is it true that we can't leave unless we defeat that mage? Isn't there a safer way we could, I don't know, sneak out? Saber had been seriously injured, and Aika wanted to avoid conflict as much as possible, but the denial came from a direction other than Saber. I think that would prove difficult. There is a possibility, but who could say how long it would take to find a way without anything to go on? The female police officer told her with an expression like an android, whose emotions had not yet been configured. Vera, right? Thank you for answering so thoroughly. A world with few signs of human life. The area around Aika and Saber, however, was an exception. 10 of the police officers whom they had met in the church were surrounding the pair as they walked. The officers had informed Aika that the world they were in was part of a closed space, and Aika had formed a temporary contract with them to eliminate the source that had created it. As far as Aika was concerned, it was better than being arrested, and Saber saw no reason to object to the temporary alliance, so they had ended up joining forces without much hesitation. Vera Levitt. That was how the leader of the police officers had just introduced herself. Aika glanced at her and asked, still warily, "Are you, a master in the Grail War?" "No, I'm not. I can't tell you the details, but think of me as a member of a faction working for a master." "So, the police are in league with the mages who set up this Holy Grail War, but probably not all of you. The ones who questioned me didn't seem to know anything." Saber plainly stated his conjectures with his usual candor. "But judging by the importance of your battle in front of the hospital, it's reasonable to suppose that you sent the majority of your forces there. And given that no reinforcements came, I'd guess that a bare minimum stayed to guard the master you work for, and you have around 30 police officers working with you. Am I right?" "I don't consider that information necessary for our escape." "You're certainly honest." "What do you mean?" Vera asked suspiciously but remained expressionless. "It's entirely possible you dispatched another 100 officers to other important locations," Saber explained, "but your brief silence and the way your eyes moved made it obvious that I guessed right." Vera fell silent. "Wasn't it kind of mean to go out of your way to point that out?" Aika sounded disgusted. "No, it's not like that," Saber hurriedly countered. "I wasn't mocking her or showing off. Her reactions to an unexpected conversation were easy to read because, well, she's fundamentally honest. I meant that it's a virtue that she can be honest despite being a mage. There was a mage called Saint Germain who hung around me. I could truly never tell if what he said was true or if he was making it all up." At that, other voices chimed in. "Saint Germain? The alchemist?" The officers walking nearby muttered to each other. "Oh, I guess he really is famous. He always said he'd hoped he'd dropped in on all kinds of people. I sympathize with the people he bothered. But then, the kind of big names that went down in history probably had no problem accepting his odd ways," Saber added with a shrug. "Are you really a heroic spirit?" one of the officers asked. "You seem awfully relaxed." The young officer had been too focused on the battle with Alcides to see the details of Saber's duel with the King of Heroes. That's why he found Saber unbelievably carefree compared to the heroic spirits he had faced, Assassin, who had attacked the police station, and Alcides. The other officers admonished their young colleague, "Hey, what do you do if he takes that as a challenge?" But in Saber's mind, the young officer's words recalled a certain voice. "You're always like that, brother. You race across the battlefield like a devil, but you completely let your guard down in peacetime. Do you understand what it means to be king, brother?" "Oh, this is John." "And you are?" Saber asked the young officer, fondly remembering his relatives' exclamations from his lifetime. "John Wingard. You can call me John." Saber's eyes widened in response. Just gonna check something. King Richard and John? Is there a... Oh, John is the name of his brother. Well, that explains that. Saber's so the police officers in Aika were startled by Saber's sudden change in expression, but Saber himself paid them no mind and said with a look of joy, "I see. So your name's John. This must be fate. Let's be friends, John. Think of it as going with my carelessness." Saber walked amiably up to the officer and patted him on the back. John, who had no idea what was going on, looked cautiously. "Where's this come from? What's my name got to do with anything?" "Oh, well, you see." Saber glanced away, apparently conflicted. "Have you figured out my true name? Whether I can tell depends on that." "Oh, hang on. That means I just gave away that the name John has something to do with my true name. All right, wait a moment while I figure out how to gloss that over." "It's already hopeless. Just give up," Aika said with a sigh, although she did not appear angry. Aika understood that true names were important, but the heroic spirit had introduced himself to her despite her protests that she did not want to know, so it was clear to her that the chances of keeping it hidden were slim. A proper master might have ordered him to not reveal any information connected to his true name, even if it cost them a command spell. Aika, however, did not even think of herself as a master, and was just assuming the position that if Saber were going to give it away on his own, there was nothing she could do about it. Aika was still exasperated, but Saber ignored her and presented the excuse he had come up with. I know. The makers... Oh my god. The makers of the wonderful modern music I heard last night. Elton, Lennon, Williams, Travolta. Wow. I just thought you might have musical talent, seeing as you have the same name as them. But John is Elton John's last name. Oh my god, one of the officers pointed out. Saber, however, began to hum contemporary music with unnecessary skill in an effort to play it off. What random character... I'm going to put all four in the thumbnail and see if anyone, can recognize them or understand why they're there. That's hilarious, right? This doesn't seem something a heroic spirit who's supposed to hide his true name would say. Vera, who had been watching, muttered to herself with a rare look of confusion. In the Fourth Holy Grail War in Fuyuki, there had been a heroic spirit who loudly announced his name to people he was meeting with for the first time, but Vera had no way of knowing that anecdote. Oh, just put a little bit of history in there for the fact of it. She conjectured that this saber was either highly unique or a cunning servant, calculatedly playing the clown. Given his eccentric behavior, such as declaring that he would pay for the damage to the opera house in front of TV cameras or dematerializing in front of non-mage police officers, she was leaning toward the latter. Based on that conjecture, Vera deliberately doled out a small amount of their information. The chief seemed to have an idea of your true name. Vera shared information with the chief, but that information was not passed on to the other officers. The chief had been reasoning analogically, based on the information that Saber had blonde hair streaked with red and the speech he had given in front of the opera house. Spreading information before they were certain could prove fatal. They turned out to be mistaken. As a result, she did not attempt to identify him as the Lionheart, and instead attempted to keep him in check by suggesting they knew his identity. John heard his superior and asked Richard again, "All that aside, aren't you still a little carefree for a hero? You didn't make a fuss about trusting us or showing us your back. What are you planning to do if we attack your master here? Well, that's an interesting question. What do you think I should do, Ayaka? You're asking me? You're the one whose life would be in danger. I'd like to ask you how to deal with the enemies while we have the chance. I wouldn't want to accidentally kill one with a counterattack, only to end up making you sad because you didn't want me to kill anyone. Richard was practically saying that actually dealing with them would be easy. One of the officers, who felt slighted, called with a slightly disgruntled look. You seem awfully sure of yourself. Are you trying to say you could hold back against us and still not? John stopped him with a hand. What, John? Haven't you noticed? We're being watched. The officer looked at John and was taken aback. For the past several seconds, John had been sweeping his gaze over their surroundings, with a grim expression and cold sweat beading on his forehead. Richard, on the other hand, looked at John impressed. I'm surprised. You noticed in an instant. Either way, I don't think you'd be so cowardly as to attack Ayaka from behind, but I see you'd make a good knight as well as good official. Ayaka did not understand what they were talking about, while the police officer turned their attention to their surroundings. Like John, caution and surprise were causing cold sweat to form on their faces. Only Vera remained cool. She shifted her attention to the pistol holstered at her hip and asked, 2. No, 3. Can I consider that to be your forces? Huh? What? Ayaka looked around again and finally noticed. A heavily bandaged man she had seen the other day was standing on top of a building, and a lance-wielding man on horseback was peering at them out of the alleyway. That's... Yes. I introduced the archer to you before, Ayaka. I'm impressed, Vera. I didn't expect you to sense assassin while he's hidden. Oh, wait, they're here, oh! I couldn't sense him, but I judged that you would need one more to cover all your blind spots and protect Ayaka Seijo. Huh. Wait. I couldn't sense him. Who's saying that then? Wait, I'm confused by this. Ayaka looked around and noticed. So then she says that. Yes, I introduced you. I couldn't sense it, but I judged you would need one more to cover all your blind spots. That's a weird one. I don't know who's saying that one there. That's even more impressive, I see. The people around you must shine brighter in a battle with you leading them. Oh, was that John then? I guess so. Yeah, okay. Richard casually remarked. As he did so, the archers and others vanished like a mist lifting. What's going on? John asked, still tense. What are they? My comrades. While I'm certain that you won't target Ayaka, I'll introduce them to you along with my true name. Comrades. Did you summon them from outside this ward? Richard answered Vera's doubt with a shake of his head. They're half fused with my spirit origin. They just came with me automatically. As a check on us. That was careless. We're guessing your true name. Don't you think that information will bring us a step closer to the heart of the matter? Are you concerned for me? I knew that you were more like knights than mages. Vera remained expressionless, but narrowed her eyes. Oh, I apologize if I offended you, Richard answered cheerfully. That wasn't an insult. I value chivalry, but I don't disdain mages. I'm praising your humanity. You're cool and collected, but you aren't callous. That doesn't answer my question. You've been letting your guard down with us too much. You're putting all your effort into protecting Ayaka Seijo, but you seem to be lacking any idea of ultimately defeating us once our alliance is over. As someone in this alliance with you, that strikes me as a cause for concern. In other words, I seem like I must be plotting something, so you can't trust me to watch your backs? What, Saber, isn't that kind of... Ayaka started to protest, but Saber stopped her. It's fine. Thank you, Ayaka. Well, I understand her caution as someone responsible for an organization. But if we want to return to our world safely, it will help to clear up any ill feelings in our alliance. Having said that, Saber came to a halt in the middle of the carless street and addressed the police officers. I suppose you're right. I still haven't managed to get serious about concealing my true name. No, about this entire Holy Grail War. I was only in earnest about my personal war with that golden heroic spirit. You aren't taking it seriously? Yes, I'm not going easy out of disdain for you. I already explained this to Ayaka, but I simply haven't found a wish for the Holy Grail. You don't have a wish. Vera was doubtful. With few exceptions, the heroic spirits summoned by the Holy Grail form contract with living mages in order to make use of the Grail's wish-granting powers. If Saber had no wish, then why had he manifested? Is it because the Grail is a fake? No, but Vera tried to reason it out, but determined that she ought to leave anything further to Chief and Caster, Demos, and continue to listen to Saber's words in silence. There are things I prayed to God for when I was alive. It's not easy to tell whether my prayers were answered, but they were things I can't wish for on the Grail. Or rather, there would be no point wishing for them. But since I was summoned here like this, I suppose I must have some wish that even I don't know about yet. Saber gave a casual shrug and flashed a friendly grin at the police officers. Basically, until I find that wish, I'm not thinking about going out of my way to kill you to win. My top priority right now is to return Ayaka to her homeland unharmed. My homeland? For some reason, it was Ayaka who asked that question. You came from Japan, didn't you? Am I wrong? No, you're right, but it's nothing. Sorry for interrupting, just keep going. Ayaka mumbled evasively and became lost in thought. Saber was concerned about Ayaka, but his speech to the police brought his speech to the police officers to a conclusion. So, I will keep our alliance as long as you have no intention of harming Ayaka. Yesterday's enemy becoming today's ally was an everyday occurrence in my day. Saber grinned as if to ask, what about in your era? Vera considered briefly, then surveyed her fellow officers and nodded. Understood. We won't accept everything you've said on faith, but we will keep our agreement. Once he was sure Vera had finished, John spoke to Ayaka. Sorry about that. It was only to test your partner, but I still talked about stabbing you in the back. That's not something a cop should be doing. Sorry. Huh? Oh, don't mention it. Saber started it, anyway. Ayaka answered bluntly. John let out a sigh of relief. Thanks. You're awfully tolerant for a mage. That's because I'm not a mage. Huh? John and the other officers looked confused. Ayaka, however, seemed unwilling to explain further because she shrugged and began walking with Saber. Ayaka Seijo. Vera did not let it show in her expression, but she was reconsidering Ayaka Seijo. Who is she? According to the records of her interrogation, she was a tourist visiting the city, but further investigation had revealed that the records of her entry in the United States had been falsified. She must have entered the country illegally through some kind of string pulling, but Ayaka herself seems strangely unaware of that fact. There was also information the chief had shared with Vera, but had kept from the other members of the clan Calatin because it might cause some confusion. There is a mage by the same name, but she, Seijo Ayaka, is confirmed to be active in Romania. I saw a photo of her face, and she does look identical apart from her hair and eye color. If she's a fake, then for what purpose? If she planned to take Seijo Ayaka's place, why did she change her hair color? Seijo Ayaka is supposed to have an older sister. Oh, that is interesting that she... Oh, Manaka exists in this world too. Oh my god! Okay, so like again, I read all of prototype fragments. If Manaka exists in this world and is still alive, she could like no-diff everyone in this entire thing. Manaka is one of the craziest characters ever. Like, what the frick? She's up there with like Void Shiki. It's ridiculous. In any case, I'll have to keep up my guard. Now that they were unable to contact the chief, Vera was, for all intents and purposes, the leader of Clan Calatin. She decided work with Saber and Ayaka while maintaining the bare minimum of caution. They possessed numerous noble phantasms of their own, but considering their individual combat ability, she determined that antagonizing Saber would be inadvisable. At that point, Saber voiced a question as he walked. Hey, what is it? You said you're going to eliminate the mage or servant behind this, didn't you? Yes. We theorize that this is the most reliable method of destroying this ward world. Saber thought for a moment, moved his mouth slightly as if talking to himself, and then, "Yes, I suppose so. My comrade Castor agrees that would be the simplest way." "Your comrade?" "Think of them as something like that bandaged archer and the others." That makes it sound interesting, like they are separate. I'm wondering about that. Even as one that acts as a mage? Vera recalled that mysterious entities that were probably part of the spirit origin that was Saber, whose spirit origins seemed weaker than proper servants, but still far stronger than ordinary mages, grew even more wary than before. Saber's words, however, threw cold water on both Vera's caution and the other officers' determination to give their all to escape. Still, most of my comrades aren't too enthusiastic about it. Why not? Why not? You're asking why not? Are you sure you're not overlooking an important possibility? Saber stopped again and said, giving them a glimpse of his serious face as a heroic spirit, not the carefree attitude he had shown them so far. That girl you were trying to protect. Little Tsubaki, wasn't it? I heard from a mercenary I met yesterday. I heard about her. But have you considered that the one who shut us up in this world could be Tsubaki's servant? Vera and a few other officers who had been preparing for the possibility lowered their gazes slightly, while John and several others who had just realized were momentarily taken aback, and they began to make a variety of expressions. Of course, it could be that crazy thing that fought the Golden Archer at the end, or some other servant I haven't even seen. Saber paused, then asked the cruel question in a matter-of-fact tone. But if that little girl is the cause, will you be able to kill her? Okay. At the same time, closed off town, inside Crystal Hill Casino. While Saber and the police officers were walking along Main Street, a different group was moving quietly nearby, I'm assuming. It was not, or I guess maybe just quite nearby. It was not the second group of police officers who had split their forces. They had never joined up with Saber and the police officers in the first place. One of them, his eyes shining as he spun a roulette wheel by hand, claimed, "Oh wow, I only watched at Mr. Fem's casino." Okay, cool, you're just talking about him. Well, we did see him in the anime, so I couldn't tell, but now I get to spin a roulette wheel myself. It's lighter than I thought. The young man, Gladys Scardos, shouted like a child. An answering voice came from the watch wrapped around his wrist. I doubt anyone but you would think of that in our situation. Then the heroic spirit-turned wristwatch, Berserker, aka Jack the Ripper, stated his impressions as he surveyed their surroundings. A totally silent casino with no hustle or bustle is a little eerie. What? You know casinos, Jack? Only as information. It was either given to me by the Grail, or perhaps due to the theory that my true identity was an immortal gambler. In any case, I can guess how much noise this place is ordinarily filled with from its gaudy decor. Yeah, it certainly makes you uneasy, the pair's companion, who had been watching the exchange, added with a shrug. It looks like there's power, but wait, companion who'd been watching, oh, we're talking about Hansa. Yes, it certainly makes you uneasy, the pair's companion, blah, blah, blah. It looks like there's power, but I'm surprised how much quieter it is with no one working the slots. The man looked to be in his mid-30s and was distinctly dressed in a priest's cassock and an eye patch. Four peculiarly dressed young women, who now that we know look like characters from Nier Automata, followed behind him, each surveying their surroundings with serious expressions. The priest's name was Hansa Cervantes. He was an overseer dispatched by the Holy Church, but he and his nun subordinates had been enveloped by the black mist and trapped in that world. I think the police are here too. Shouldn't we meet up with them? Flat casually asked the overseer. I provided the church, but if this is part of the Holy Grail War caused by a servant, then helping them to escape would be unwarranted favoritism. That goes for you too, of course. I'll share information, but I don't plan on helping you destroy this ward world. Once Hans had realized that he had been pulled into a ward modeled on the city, he had set out to investigate alone. In the process, he had encountered Flat, and they were now joining forces to survey the city. Oh, really? Well, guess I can't complain. I wouldn't enjoy winning a game when the judge was taking my side anyway. Plus, if he did that, I got a feeling the Holy Church would end up taking the Grail. Flat regretfully related his negative opinion of the Holy Church, but Hansa nodded with a wry smile. Yeah, you're right. I'd probably do that if I got orders from higher up. It's always been obvious that nothing good would come of letting the mages get their hands on something that grants wishes. And the Holy Grail War having an overseer originally applied to a Japanese city called Fuyuki, right? But it's a fact that we're using that as our excuse to intervene. My bosses might change their policy if they ever realize just how different this Grail War is from the one in Fuyuki. Okay, so that implies... That's it. Okay, that's interesting. So there are, like normally you don't need to have a overseer from the church. The one in Fuyuki did. And now they're like, well, now we do that for all of them. Sure. Hansa deliberately refrained from saying whether that change would be for the better or worse, and shifted his gaze to his nuns. Well, it's no use, one of the nuns answered politely with a shake of her head. We were unable to detect the presence of a mystical cour forming the ward in this area. It may be skillfully concealed, but in that case, it may prove difficult to locate with our equipment. I see. I thought they might be drawing on the Grail's power directly, considering they're recreating the whole city. But that doesn't matter if we can't locate the cour. Whether they were looking for the Grail or the core of the ward world, they had guessed that there would be something suspicious about the tallest building in the city center, but it appeared they had guessed wrong. The power's on, right? Flat asked. Yeah, Hansa answered, looking up at the chandeliers on the ceiling. But who knows where it's coming from, so who knows when it'll stop? I'd like to try going up to the top floor while the elevators are still working. Oh, you think the cour might be there? It's true the area extends above and below the building. Might be worth checking. Oh no. Flat stopped him with a wave of his hand. I didn't mean that. It would be a lucky break for us if it were up there, though. It's because from up there, I can see the whole city. Do you have a plan? Flat answered Jack with a slight nod, slapping his own cheeks to psych himself up and said, If I take a look at it, I might be able to figure something out. If I can find a place where the guard is thin, I might be able to get in touch with the outside. At the same time, Los Angeles, USA. Report, special alert, are advised, hurricane is moving, normally inconceivable. National Weather Service, appropriate, ignoring the ordinary. Oh my God, they literally are saying we're ignoring the special name. That's hilarious. A special designation to Lisbur? Elizabeth. That's what it must be. What name are they giving it? I'm so scared. These letters are scaring me. At that point, unless it's Liber, and the Z's are just part of the background noise, they're not calling it Hurricane Excalibur. Can you imagine if it's called Hurricane Excalibur? At that point, the voice of the I could play freaking Weather Network music here, hell yeah. At that point, the voice of the emergency management radio became even more distorted, and the sound of static completely dominated the cramped space. The driver's seat of a truck lying overturned on the side of the road. Due to the fierce winds and driving rain, water began to intrude through the broken windows. The radio continued to hum with static, heedless of the situation, but it was only a matter of time until it was completely submerged. The driver appeared to have long since evacuated. A scattering of fallen billboards and broken trees was visible nearby, but there was not a human to be seen. The record-breaking hurricane had formed suddenly and without warning. Central Los Angeles would escape with only a few more damaged cars and buildings, but those who endured the raindrops pelting their faces to look up at the sky in the midst of the storm would later say, 4 huge tornadoes came down from the sky. Oh my God, that's its feet. Yeah! They strode across the land, shrouded in flashes of lightning, almost like the feet of a gargantuan beast braving the skies and threatening to trample the very world to pieces. Dude, hell yeah, let's go. Okay, Interlude. Yeah, let's go. These are shorter chapters. Let's do this. Mercenary Assassin, Pale Rider. Okay. I'm glad you're both better now. An innocent girl's voice rang out in the garden, showered in warm sunshine. Squirrels, kittens, and other small animals scampered over the neatly trimmed lawn, and the countless little birds perched on the branches of a tree that grew in the garden were giving a modest singing recital. If the word heartwarming took a physical form, it would probably be a scene like this. There, the kind of vista seen only in picture books spread out in reality. The two people the girl had spoken to, however, were totally divorced from that atmosphere. One was a young man in black. There were still traces of childhood in his appearance, and he could just as easily be called a boy. But in contrast to his looks, he wore an unsettling assortment of holstered guns, knives, and other weapons. The other was a girl, her whole figure likewise in black. Beneath her black cloak, which concealed much of her face and skin as humanly possible, she was looking around with a hint of confusion. If that were all, she would look like an ordinary woman in a niqab, but the black folds of her garment had hid countless weapons, and something about her, unrelated to her dress, gave a general impression of danger. The young man's name was Sigma. The girl was a servant who had been summoned as assassin in the fake Holy Grail War. A variety of circumstances had led the two of them to act together, but they were currently trapped together in this strange space. Yeah, thanks. You have my gratitude. Sigma and the girl assassin each expressed their thanks. The young girl, Kuraoka Tsubaki, responded by looking bashfully and dashing awkwardly into the house. That was Kuraoka Tsubaki? So that's the girl who commanded a heroic spirit while unconscious. Both of them had already realized. The girl's parents, who lived in the same house with her, were clearly under the mental control of something, but only the girl was different. She was subject to no mental restraint, truly free, meaning that black figure was her servant, the large figure that Kuraoka Tsubaki had introduced as Mr. Black. Pale glows floated here and there inside the mass of shadows, roughly as tall as a tree in the garden, and was so dark it seemed to suck in nearby light. It had withdrawn into the house for the moment, but it had not appeared to have substance, so it would not be surprising if it sprang out of the ground without warning. Thought prompted Sigma to increase vigilance and the girl assassin to thought. What? Wait, what? To thought? As in like T-O-O maybe? Was it really a heroic spirit? It could be a monster or a wraith, Sigma muttered, but the girl assassin shook her head. No, I don't think so. I did not sense any tremors of malice or hatred from that being. No, I sensed no fluctuations of magical energy at all. The magecraft user and servant remembered how they had both been surprised by that shadow when they had woken up in the garden. If it were hostile, it would have already dispatched them. Considering that they had not been attacked in their sleep, they thought they might not even recognize them as enemies. I don't sense anything like consciousness from it, but it does seem to obey that child. Assassin's words prompted Sigma to broaden his speculation. Maybe her servant is something else and that shadow is a familiar? It's possible, but we lack sufficient information. That fiend, the hematophage, must know something. Assassin gritted her teeth beneath her veil, but she could not sense the hematophage either. He was certainly plotting something, but it would be difficult to locate him unless he made contact. Two of them had just surveyed the area and are under the pretense of going for a walk, but they had found few signs of human life. They had spotted the occasional human figure, but like Kuraoka Tsubaki's parents, they seemed to be under some form of mental control. They could make conversation, but that was all. They did not seem particularly alarmed by Sigma's armament, nor did they seem to know anything about their world. They had made numerous inquiries, but the people were ordinary civilians and unresponsive, and they had not been able to obtain any information. There was only one commonality. Most of the people walking claimed to have lived in the factory district, but fled from a fire or some other disaster. The factory fire. I heard about it yesterday. A battle between two heroic spirits. According to what he heard from Watcher before he had lost contact, a heroic spirit who had not been involved in the battle had concealed the damage to the destroyed factory district, but it seemed like they could not erase the fact that a fire had occurred. The residents, however, had apparently displayed strange behavior and seemed, like Kuraoka Tsubaki's parents, to be under some kind of mind control. They could have carried their investigations further by taking destructive actions against those people in that city, but given that they did not understand the structure of the world or the enemy's capabilities, that would be suicidal. Sigma considered calmly and decided to investigate based on the fact that telepathy was usable. Ordinary civilians won't understand the situation whether under mind control or not. But what about a mage who knows the hidden side of the Holy Grail War? You want to ask me something? Kuraoka Tsubaki's father said with somewhat vacant eyes. Yes, somewhere away from your daughter, if possible. The mage, who had come far as the front door at Sigma's suggestion, glanced into the house and said, Well, that could be tricky. I promised my daughter I'd read a book to her, so I can't go that far. Oh, just down the street would be fine. I see. In that case, Tsubaki's father left his family's property with no resistance and followed Sigma to a little park nestled in the residential district. It really was coincidence that we ended up at your house, but I recognize you, Kuraoka Yukaku. Oh, have we met somewhere before? My employer's name is Francesca. I have a deal with a man called Faldius. That, Kuraoka Yukaku's face took on a grim look. I guessed you were a magecraft user when I saw your equipment. I see I was right. But as I told Faldius, the Grail War is the farthest thing from my mind right now. I can't give you any... No, I'm not going to ask you to cooperate with us, Sigma cut in dispassionately. But could you tell us what's going on? His tone was polite, but there was no emotion in it. Sigma showed the face of a magecraft-using mercenary faced with a mage and tensed himself for sudden attack. Assassin was hiding in a corner of a park, keeping a watch on the area. Given that conversation was possible, they planned to gauge the intentions of the person exerting the mental control by the information they were able to get from Kuraoka, or conversely, by the information he was able to tell them in a mind-controlled state. However, yes, I can do that. As far as I can see, the servant protecting my dear little Tsubaki intentionally created this world. It's outside my area of expertise, but I think it may be a type of reality marble. Tsubaki's servant is possibly the embodiment of a concept. I'd say it's the concept of death, nothingness, or disease intentionally given a personality. In Japan, my home country, a yokai called a yanari was created to explain houses creaking. That was a type of folk magecraft. Deciding that it was a conscious being, giving it form and taking mental measures against it. Considering the servant's power, however, I believe it must be an entity recognized on a global scale. I think I could analyze it more accurately if I examined it carefully, but since I dropped out of the Grail War to live quietly with my daughter, I don't have time for that. Calmly, casually, as if it were of no importance, Kuraoka Yukaku began to give his opinion as a mage. But despite that, his way of speaking made it clear that he was still subject to mental control. He hasn't been prevented from talking about magecraft, not even from speculating about the servant's identity. Or is he being controlled to feed us false information? But if that were the case, wouldn't they make the extent of their control more ambiguous? Sigma was confident that he could see through an ordinary person's lies using his experience and techniques as a magecraft user. But discovering the lies of a mage, especially one who would use auto-suggestion to convince themselves they were telling the truth, would require more experience, talent, and specialized magecraft. If I were connected to Watcher, I could compare it to information from the shadows to reach a conclusion. Sigma's servant, Watcher, was supposed to be gathering all visual and auditory information from across the city, but he was currently unable to contact it. That was why he needed information that would help him get outside at any cost. but he would need more for that. Don't you want to leave this ward? What for? Our daughter Tsubaki is so healthy here. Isn't it possible that the servant is controlling your mind to make you think that way? Oh, yes, it probably is, but what's wrong with that? When he heard that, Sigma realized what the goal of the mental control was. If Kuraoka Tsubaki's servant was causing the situation, then in all probability the heroic spirit was not acting to win the Holy Grail War. Its behavior was genuinely centered on Tsubaki. But he's technically a mage participating in the Grail War. Must have taken at least some precautions against mental control, Sigma thought, but he also knew that the precautions were not perfect. There was a case in which skilled mages assembled for an auction of historical artifacts with mystical value had been betrayed and manipulated by one of their allies. The mages in question had apparently been rescued by a Lord of the Clock Tower. This is talking about Rail Zeppelin, right? Mage in question had apparently been rescued by a Lord of the Clock Tower and, ashamed of their blunder, had enrolled trustworthy members of their family in the Lord's classes. Yep. Sigma remembered the story because the Lord in question's rise in power due to the connections he had formed with powerful mages in the process had been a hot topic among magecraft using mercenaries at some point, but he dismissed the details as currently irrelevant. The important point was that, given the right opportunity, precautions against mental control could be easily broken. Encouraging him to escape or freeing him from mental control seems unfeasible. I should ask Assassin later if she has a noble phantasm that can undo brainwashing. But from what I've seen, her noble phantasm seems specialized to kill her enemies. Shouldn't get my hopes up. Sigma decided to try a different approach. Are you aware that your daughter is being targeted outside the ward? Oh, is she? Well, that's unfortunate. Kuraoka Yukaku started to leave the park, heading for home. He did not seem especially anxious, but his expression did at least darken with concern. Thank you for letting me know. Still, Tsubaki's servant seems to be in the process of becoming practically unassailable, so I'm sure it will see her through this safely. It's becoming unassailable? Yes. Just a bit before you woke up, it sent us a wonderful guard dog. What do you mean? Sigma asked just as Assassin approached them. Sigma tried to stop Yukaku, who was ignoring him and making his way home, but when he saw that Assassin had a grim look in her eyes, decided that something must have happened, and decided to stop to hear what he had to say. What's wrong? It appears your conversation was overheard. When you said, Tsubaki is being targeted, it began to move. She turned her gaze towards Tsubaki's house as she spoke. When Sigma followed her gaze, time froze for him. His brain was unable to grasp the situation. For fractions of a second, his mind went blank. The thing that did that to a magecraft user like Sigma, with his long experience as a mercenary, was a single large dog. Although opinions might be divided on whether it counted as a single dog, Sigma had seen the thing that stood in the place Kuraoka Yukaku was casually walking to once before. It took him a moment, however, to realize that it was the same thing. He was sure that it had been killed on Main Street, and also that it had been the size of an adult elephant. The thing that Sigma and Assassin stared up at with the beginnings of a cold sweat was Kerberos, the three-headed guard dog of Hades, grown larger than a house. That's a random place for that picture. I know when this occurs, but that's a very random spot for this. That's a very random spot. Huh? Okay. Very strange. Oh, there's only one more page. Okay, well. This is a weird spot for this picture. Because I know when this is. Okay. Snowfield Factory District. About your noble phantasm. Can you still use the birds and the dog? Bastelot Corleone asked. Also, can I just say, I now know that Coeur de Leon is a hilarious name, because that is also that means literally like Lionheart, right? Like, oh my god, your name here is really funny. Servicing a pistol-shaped mystic code. I was gonna laugh at that, but then I remembered that the coolest mystic code is pistol-shaped. It's the Black Barrel. While members of the Scladio family were busy repairing his workshop, Alcides lifted his dematerialization and stared at his own hands as he answered. The birds won't be an issue, but activating Kerberos will prove difficult. Are there limitations on the regeneration of individual beasts? No. Ordinarily, with your magical energy, I should be able to reactivate them after a day, but I can't do it now. It seems its actual spirit origin was scraped away by that black mist, along with 3 of the horses. You have a noble phantasm that steals noble phantasms, and I never expected one of yours to be stolen. Still, the dogs or horses falling into the enemy's hands shouldn't pose a problem, Basilot Corleone said dispassionately. Alcides, silently shook his head. Not necessarily. Does something worry you? They may have been stolen, but at the ends of the royal orders I was tasked with are the foundation of my spirit origin. Even if they are no longer mine, I know when they undergo a change. The vengeful bowman frowned beneath his cloth as he carefully probed the alteration in the links of his spirit origin. But this is... After a short pause for thought, Alcides clenched his fists. Then, as magical energy mixed with blood and mud trickled from between his fingers... magical energy mixed with mud and blood trickled from his fingers, he whispered with quiet rage, all the while recalling the familiar darkness of the other side that edged toward him through the faint link of magical energy. Could the one who controls the black mist possibly be a relative of Hades? When he finally relaxed his fist, he murmured with the faintest hint of pity in a voice that not even Basilot could hear. In that case, even if I do not harm her, its master is fated to be hunted eventually. Hunted by the true heroes who safeguard the people. Damn. Damn, what a good chapter. Again, this picture seems ridiculously out of place, which makes me worried that our other picture's out of place. I don't think so, but it's very strange. Yeah. Next time, guys, chapter 18. As dream and reality are both illusion. So it is nice. We are getting a mix of new stuff and like stuff that we are recapping from the anime. I'm actually really liking this because boy, it's so much easier to visualize and read and understand when I've got such a strong basis by watching the anime in such detail. It's quite nice. Anyways, guys, we'll continue on next time with chapter 18. We'll see you then. Ciao.
Yo.